Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, a book which really surprised me, pleasantly so. So, I don't really know all that much about this author other than just what's on the blurb here on the back of the book, but this book has been experiencing a real surge in popularity, it seems, recently. And that's kind of unusual given that this is not a new book. In fact, I think this book was written in the 1970s, but like I say, recently it seems to have been experiencing something of a renaissance. And so I saw it one day on the shelf in my local bookstore, and like I'd heard of it, and what I'd heard of it made it sound, vaguely intriguing to me. So just kind of on a whim, I decided to pick it up and add it to my collection. But I really didn't expect all that much out of it. Again, I wasn't overly familiar with it, so I didn't know, how well I was really going to like it. But having read it now, I have to say I came away thoroughly enjoying this book. In fact, dare I say it, I low key kind of love this book actually. So, what is the book actually about? What is the story of I Who Have Never Known Men? Well, the book is presented as the memoirs of a nameless woman who recounts how she, as a child, was imprisoned along with 39 other adult women in a cage within an underground bunker, guarded by guards who don't communicate with them. And the purpose of their confinement is totally unknown to them. It seems to be that there was some sort of catastrophic event prior to their captivity, but no one's really sure about anything, it seems, and we're never made privy to, what exactly went down. But anyway, so these women and this one girl are trapped in this cage, and they're just like, living the lives of prisoners until one day an alarm goes off and the guards all skedaddle, but they leave the keys in the door. So the women escape and they make their way to the surface where they are confronted by a pretty desolate landscape. And it seems that they are alone. They do some exploring and they eventually find that there are many other underground prisons just like theirs, in which both women and men were kept captive, but all of them seem to have died. So these 40 females seem to be the only humans alive on Earth, if they are on Earth, because by the end of the book, it's pretty heavily implied that they're not on Earth. But anyway, so the women eventually kind of settle down and create their a little village of their own with homes and things, because the bunkers have like lots of food in them and the power never goes off. It just is seemingly inexhaustible, so they don't want for supplies, but they're just totally alone, and they eventually, like I say, settle down, kind of build a little village of their own, but then they eventually begin to die off one by one. And the narrator, who is the youngest because she was just a child, whereas all the others were adults, eventually finds herself the last woman standing. She is the last of the escapees, and she is presumably, very possibly, the last human on this planet. And so she sets out exploring again, wandering this empty wasteland. She eventually finds a bus with the skeletons of some of the guards, like those that watched over them. Just, kind of yet another mystery that is seemingly inexplicable. Eventually, she finds a rather luxurious, like, doomsday bunker kind of thing, which is unoccupied, and she makes that her home, and thus she is writing down her life story as she is dying of uterine cancer. Who she's writing it to is unknown because, like I say, she is presumably the last person on this planet. But anyway, so yeah, that's the book. That's it. That's pretty much the plot of the book. So let's talk about the technical qualities of the work. Now, the writing in this was pretty strong, honestly. It's not the most dazzling display of prose I've ever encountered. It's not like overly grandiloquent, but it is pretty well done. There are some real striking lines in this. There are a lot of lines in this that kind of have almost like an aphoristic quality to them that really kind of leap out at you. And I liked that. It's a very strongly written book. The prose is mostly straightforward, but it's very well done. It's not, again, not gonna probably like razzle dazzle you, but it's very strong and it does what it does very well. And I really have no complaints. I think it's a very well written book. Now on to the characters. Well, the only character that really has any depth in this is the narrator, uh, whose name is never known. But she is a pretty interesting character, honestly. She knows that she is different from all these other women because she doesn't really have any memories of the world before their captivity in the bunker. And she has kind of grown up without like proper parenting. She's very kind of distant emotionally and kind of cold. And her voice is pretty striking because she knows that there's so much that she's missing out on from the world before and that she'll never understand. And this kind of makes her resentful at times, but then also it makes her very, again, distinct from the other women that she lives with. The other women don't really have much depth at all. There's like one secondary character who has kind of a little bit of depth, who is like the narrator's closest confidant, like her favorite, I suppose. But that's pretty much it. Mainly, it's just a one woman show. Eventually, in the latter portions of the book, it literally becomes a one woman show. But I liked the narrator. She's I think she's a pretty good character. Honestly, she is, again, very distinct from the norm, you might say, but she's understandable and she's relatable. And I really got invested in her story and I appreciated the voice with which it was told. So where it counts, I think this book did a great job. Now let's talk about the actual like story that I Who Have Never Known Men tells. It's very cryptic. It is very cryptic, and it's hard to pigeonhole it exactly into a specific genre. Uh, you might could call this science fiction, even though there really isn't anything terribly science fictional about it. You could perhaps call this post-apocalyptic fiction, even though we're not sure exactly what the specifics of the apocalypse, if it in fact was an apocalypse that happened. You could call this like kind of existential literature. It especially kind of goes that way in its latter portions as it becomes just one woman wandering the wasteland, talking to herself, kind of. It has some real it has some real matters on its mind, I would say. It kind of leans into a kind of philosophical bent at times, again, kind of existential. But there were definite shades of Kafka in this, I think, because the purpose of the captivity of these women is never known to them or to us, the reader. We don't know what happened before. We don't really know anything. We don't know where they even are because it becomes pretty apparent by the end of the book that they're probably not on Earth because the landscape is not really Earth-like. And we don't know why there are so many different bunkers with so many different captives. We don't know any of this. It definitely feels very Kafka-esque to me in certain respects. But also another book that I was reminded of when reading I Who Have Never Known Men would be David Markson's Wittgenstein's Mistress. I was reminded of this because in the latter portions of I Who Have Never Known Men, once all the other women have died, the narrator is the only person left, presumably on the planet, and that is that is very similar to the plot of Wittgenstein's Mistress, which is also about a woman who inexplicably seems to be the last person on the planet. So I was reminded of this book as well. But, overall, This book really sucked me in. And again, I didn't really expect much out of this book because I just didn't really know all that much about it. But I, once again, was pleasantly surprised because this was one hell of an absorbing read for me anyway. Some people might find it frustrating, I think, because so little is revealed. We don't know anything. But if you are able to come to terms with narratives which are not clear cut, which do not reveal everything or really much of anything, really, that leave a lot of questions unanswered. If you are able to um, make peace with the mystery, I think that this book might do the same for you as it did for me. Because once again, I came away thoroughly enjoying this book. And like I say, I low key kind of love this book, honestly. Of the fiction that I've read thus far this year, this is probably the best work so far. This is leading the pack when it comes to my fiction reading so far this year. So yeah, to rate I Who Have Never Known Man, I'm gonna give this book. Honestly, I think I'm gonna give it an A plus. Actually, there's not really much about it that I have to complain about. It was a really absorbing read that really pulled me in. I really got invested in it. It's well told. The voice with which it is told is pretty striking, I think, and just the cryptic nature of it all. It really hooked me. It really did. I love this book, honestly. So like I say, I don't really have anything to complain about really with it. So I'm going to give it an A plus. Yes, it is once again probably the strongest book I've read so far this year, and I'm very glad that I picked it up. So I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. Have you read this book? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read this book, like I say, consider picking this up if you are a fan of books that, once again, don't really explain a whole lot, that are very mysterious in nature when it comes to their narratives, and that are well told and, kind of lean in, once again, to that Kafka esque element. Definitely consider picking this up because I think this is a really solid read. And I can totally understand why it is experiencing such a kind of a boom in popularity because I would say it is well warranted. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.